spin it. No.
So, Steve, you missed our 3, 2, 1 because you're not supposed to record until I do 1. Don't you remember? Like, we have to do the hair and makeup check first, right?
Yeah.
Hair and makeup. All right,
bit
guys.
Bit shiny.
Yeah, bit shiny on the
I need to
top.
powder my head.
Awesome. All right, welcome everyone to. Is this our third one?
Third one.
Yeah. This month in LabVIEW, TMi, I think is how it's pronounced. This is our third TMi. It is July
too much
1st.
information, but okay.
TMi LabVIEW.
It's TMi LabVIEW. Okay, I've already lost control as the moderator, as the chief of connected conversation. I've already lost this team. I know it.
You can't contain us.
I want to welcome our LabVIEW conspirators. We have the Steve, professor of I can't even say the word pragmatism. And
that's a hard word.
It is a hard word. Then we have Sam, the architect of adventure. And joining us today is Tim, who probably could moderate this and will correct me if I don't moderate correctly. Tim, who is Tip Top Tim. Welcome, Tim Robinson, to the TMi this month in LabVIEW, where we go through all the latest and greatest news in the community, with NI, events, you name it. So we do want to start off this month in LabVIEW with news that is not the fun news, not the why didn't I do that news, but rather we have some sad news in the community. One of our most recent introductees into the LabVIEW champions, and Kurt really should have been a LabVIEW champion for a decade at least. We got news that Kurt Friday, who is one of our peers who lived in Balmain, which is a suburb of Sydney, passed away. Kurt leaves his son, Ben, 10 years old. And I'm just going to say real quickly that Ben, if you get a chance to ever hear this, your dad was an amazing gentleman. He was very kind, super witty, and has developed a lot of, or potentially some really, well, he has a lot of great code out there already that's still running production at some major companies, but he also has invested in some really cool design patterns or frameworks. And so we want to talk a little bit about Kurt, so I'm going to let you guys mention your 2 or 3 cents if you either knew Kurt or were well acquainted with some of the work that Kurt has done.
Well, I'll kick off. We've lost one of our own, you know, so it's a shame. It's a desperate shame. He's been a GDevCon early stalwart and organizer, and that's how I really ran into him. But I've known his name for a long time.
I'm pretty much in the same boat. I've seen the name a bazillion times over I don't know how long. His Viper framework actually looks very interesting. I remember looking at it. I don't remember the fine details of it, but he seemed like he knew what he's doing at least.
Yeah, I've seen him a few times on LinkedIn and talked to him a few times, and that was about it. I do have to say, as a fellow outdoor enthusiast, you know, the fact that he wandered off into the mountains, yeah, I think about that because I do a lot of that type of wandering myself, so that hits a little close to home.
Yeah. So I had a chance to get to know Kurt because Kurt was one of the, I think it was 4 individuals with Chris and Karina and one other individual who's escaping my mind at the moment, who did the very first GDevCon in APAC. And so Kurt, Chris, Karina, everyone, you guys did an awesome job of your first GDevCon outside of Sydney. Great attendance, great energy. And Kurt actually presented on Viper then. And I'm very, very intrigued by Viper because it is it's a framework in which all the components that you would have for a typical test system, there are PPL, it's object-oriented based. And so any of the customization you do really is, oh crap, I was forgetting the name, injection. What's the term?
Dependency injection.
Thank you, dependency injection. Yeah,
that's
Sam's
all about it.
Leave it to Sam.
Yeah, Sam's the youngest one on this crew, so Sam remembers the words that I forget. So, and so I got to know Kurt because he lived down the street from where I was staying, and give me a ride into GDevCon, give me a ride back, and it was great to get to know Ben's dad, who is a very kind individual, very, very sharp individual. And I have been meaning to look into Viper because I was really inspired by Kurt's presentation. and both at GLA Summit and then at GDevCon. So I know a few of us at least are going to be diving into Viper and hopefully continue Kurt's legacy within the LabVIEW community. But it is sad, it's hard. We're missing one of our best. And so if there's anything else that you guys want to say on this, please do. But there's two things I'm thinking about from this conversation that I want to continue with. One is that some of us have not spent as much time with our friends halfway around the world, really getting to know them as individuals and getting to know some of their skill sets. Some of us who are really, really, really old timers, well, we know Mikhail Holstrom, he's been a long time LabVIEW champion, really kicked off the object-oriented movement, had an object-oriented class before NI came out with object-oriented programming. And so I'd love to see some of us revitalize those connections we have to our friends down under. And then the other thing is really design patterns. And so it's interesting, we sometimes have the religious wars around design patterns. I know, Tim, it's frameworks. Around frameworks, whether it's actor framework or DQMH or JKI state machine objects, and there's Viper out there. So I want to open our conversation a little bit on what are some of the other frameworks that you guys have seen out there that you find intriguing, you haven't investigated yet, but I'm just going to open the floor for framework comments.
Well, Peter Scarf has generously opened up workers for LabVIEW, and that looks very slick. It's got some slick, helpful tools.
Mm-hmm.
So he needs a shout out. I think that's always worth looking into.
So, and we'll have a link to that with the broadcast, correct?
I'll gather up and put the frameworks into the show notes.
And James Powell has his messenger
framework that he uses. Yes, he does. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's also Aloha, which I haven't used. There's the Composed Systems MVA thing, and the other one actually that I've seen a lot lately is just the straight up. You mentioned JKI state machine objects, but just the regular JKI state machine I've actually encountered quite a bit recently. So, and there is a state machine tool from Jeff K. That thing's interesting, and I
haven't seen that one.
That's a state machine thing that he has for like generating documentation or something.
Oh, yes.
I don't remember what that's called, but so yeah, there's lots of other options out there.
Is Lapdog still around?
Oh,
that was Dackley, right?
Yeah, Dackley did that one. That's from Dave Snyder, isn't it?
Yeah, you can find that on Lava, I believe. But yeah, I never actually used that. And there was something active objects or something was also on there, which is basically kind of like an actor. Like you spawns a process and you send it messages, but it's a little bit more self-contained.
I think we have a focus for one of our future TMILs this month in LabVIEW. Too much information about LabVIEW. Maybe we tackle one at a time in some upcoming meetings. So Sam, I remember Aloha, and that was S5 Bedward over at S5 in Seattle. And it was a great framework where it really had a nice backbone. And then you would just build an object and there was some specific messaging, but it was almost, for lack of a better phrase, DQMH light, because it had a backbone that connected each one of the Aloha objects. But it was fantastic to really modularize software, think through that, and then bring all the components back into one big system. So maybe we'll have Craig Bedward on in a future podcast as well. Then, so we had Aloha and workers. I think I owe somebody a follow-up on LinkedIn on that one as well. Several others here. Anything else? And especially if we got some state machine stuff from Jeff K that I haven't seen, we definitely need to go dig into that.
Yeah, I did a blog post about it. I can find a link somewhere, but basically, yeah, it's, I want to say as you do it, it draws a state diagram for you, which is really cool. Because that's one of the things with state machines, right? You draw the diagram, and then as soon as you start coding, the diagram becomes out of date because
it's actually a very old tool. If it's the one I'm thinking of, it's been Jeff K wrote it like 20 years ago or something like that.
I can find the link.
200 years ago?
20.
Oh, 20 years
20.
Ago. Okay.
No, it might be older than that.
State diagram editor.
Yeah.
It was a good tool. My only problem when I tried to use it, because I was very keen on it, was it closely ties into block diagram, so you couldn't actually then modify the block diagram without going out and pushing it back. There was some tie-in that I struggled with, which made me stop using it. But it was very not. I'm very keen on the having the diagrams as a layer above the LabVIEW diagram. I think where I settled on was you generating diagrams from the LabVIEW code rather than generating LabVIEW code from the diagrams.
So Steve, you're saying that would be your preference, like in a world of prioritizing.
Yeah, it's the ASCII doc sort of model, which is right. you can generate. It just seems to me I want to work in LabVIEW. I don't want to work in the diagram above LabVIEw.
I thought that's what Jorg had, so we should have Jorg on at some point.
Yeah, he's done. Yeah, he's done it. He's done it for
I thought it just auto-generated the diagram because I don't know. I find I don't do a lot of state machines anymore. Everything's queued message handler, so it's all DQMH or actor framework, so it doesn't really lend itself to the state machine. So I tend to forget about this particular tool. But when I do a state machine, like if you inherit a state machine, the very first thing you do is you go through and you trace all the things and you draw the diagram. Yeah, so it'd be really nice if there was a thing that automatically did that. Because the problem is too, like sometimes you inherit a state machine and there's a drawing on the thing that is a diagram, but like if that's not correct, it's almost worse than no diagram because you see the diagram and you assume it's correct and you assume that's the way it works, and then it doesn't really work that way.
Well, me and Jorg went through his state machine pattern, and we were transferred it over to the ASCII dot stuff. And in doing that exercise, we found a problem in his state machine.
Oh, that's great.
So we generated it. We cracked how to generate the diagram. We threw the diagram, and I said to him, that's a state, when you get a state that has no escape. I said that state's got no escape, then you could see it really visibly. It was very cool.
Well, what I like about you and Norm and Jorg have talked about state machines, and it's doing the transition logic and having separate state logic and transition logic. Yep. And I think that's something a lot of people miss because the traditional LabVIEW state machine doesn't really have transition logic.
Yeah. Well, this gets into some that LabVIEW as a community we've had problems with is using proper CS terms and whatnot when we call it state machine, but it's really just a sequencer is what a lot of us do. That's, I mean, most of my code lately has just been a simple sequencer. We call it a state machine for some stupid reason, but it's not actually a state machine because a state machine does have your state and it has your transitions. And if you're not managing both of those, it's not a proper state machine.
No, that's my view. And I mean, I take a pragmatic view of it really is that you're missing another pigeonhole to stick code in. If you manage the transition, you can add more nuance to your code because you've got another little window that you can say, if I'm doing this transition, then I might need to fire this thing off and do this actual work.
In order to go to this state, you have to do something.
Since we're using this basically as we're using the word state machine when it's really a sequencer. And I've seen Norm's, what's Norm's framework called again?
The TLD, isn't it? TLD.
Prime.
Yeah, it had that transition logic, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, because it was.
He had messenger logic and then state logic separate.
Right. And that kind of messed with my brain a little bit when I was first trying to follow everything, but following Norm is not always easy anyhow. And so it's a little clearer now. So if you guys were, or Tim, let me ask you, and I'd love Tim to hear more kind of about your programming philosophy, given that you work in a highly regulated industry and some of the code you write might last 30 or 40 years. So there's two questions for you. Would you separate the state logic from the transition logic, kind of how Norm does it? Would you try to put it all in one sequence frame itself? So speak to that a little bit, and then maybe a little bit on writing code for 30 years.
Well, this gets into what do you actually need? Are you actually doing a state machine where you need to keep track of who's where and what? Or are you just trying to sequence through tests? A lot of what I do, I'm just sequencing through tests. So people want to call it a state machine just because that's what people have been calling it for as long as I've been doing LabVIEW. But it's really just a sequencer is all I'm doing. But sequencers are easy to understand. It's like, here's a bunch of states, go into a for loop or manage it however you want. I use a queue to handle my what states I go into. So it just dequeues and goes through, and if there's an error, I flush everything out and go to my error state and do whatever from there. So there's some states that technically, I guess, in there. So that's again comes back down to requirements. Who are you programming for? This is something we come into a lot of. Is like, I expect a newbie to understand this code. I'm not going to get into the fancy stuff like DQMH and actor framework. Heck no. So there's a balance between power versus getting someone up to speed with it. So I'd say I typically go with the down or stupid. I don't want to call it stupid. Simple. There we go. I'll go to my
simple.
presentation.
Yes.
Back to my presentation earlier this year. Keep it on the simple side is usually my take on it.
I definitely like that. Steve, state machines done right. We're going to have a link to your presentation.
Yeah.
State machines are usually useful for control systems, not for tests.
Yeah,
I will say that.
Yeah,
that's a very good differentiator. Yeah.
Although I've done a test executive, like if you have a scripted one, would use the state machine as a de-serializer of script items, and I've done that before. You know?
Yeah,
and that's quite a classic state machine. That's a very Turing machine type state machine. You know, where the state machine is being driven by the script. So that's.
Well, and I think we've had some really good conversations on this space. I think at some previous GDevCons. We are going to talk about GDevCon again later. Some of the conversations I think that Norm and Nattinger have had at GDevCon have been fantastic. And then Sam, you have some comments on some of the stuff that Darren has posted.
Yeah, I was just going to post the DNAT sequencer or the NAT sequencer.
Yes.
So
is a cool sequencer.
If the order never changes, you don't need a state machine. So if it always goes through in the same order, and you're like, right, you just drop a NAT sequence. It works really well.
Awesome.
My only real problem with the NAT sequencer is it doesn't allow you to repeat states.
That is true.
So
I'm sure you could modify
something I run into a lot of is I have to repeat something based on with a different parameter or something like that. So with that, you have to watch your nuances there. But for just a very, very, very basic sequencer, it's wonderful.
Yep.
Like all these designs, though, and design patterns, I take Tim's view of the world is you start off with the simplest and escalate as you need it, you know. So and then, you know, Sam would say refactor, but I would say, you know, it's just a simplest is best usually until it's not, and then you go to the next simplest is best until it's not.
There's a phrase, the simplest thing that could possibly work.
Yeah, but not any simpler. And I think it's an Einstein quote, and I think I have a coffee mug at home with that Einstein quote on it.
Yeah, and you always see that.
I think smart's an Einstein quote.
So even though, you know, I like the way I do state machines, they're generally only at the top level. If I've got like a little user interface wizard type thing, it's still a state machine, then I would use the much simpler one. So, you know, you pick the tool for the job, really.
I love this. And Sam, I think you and I are gonna have some young engineers in a classroom in a couple weeks. And I think we've got some interesting topics out of this little A block here. And we might weave some of that into our conversation with those young kids at CU Boulder.
Yeah.
All right. I am going to move on, and we're going to have a couple of other really cool links with the show. Tim just posted another link on a poll that happened a ways ago. So
only 5 years ago.
5 years ago? Oh, that's only 5 years. That's not too long ago. All right, something absolutely amazing happened as it relates to NI and things that NI are saying, because all of us have struggled over the past, 5 years or so with regards to NI's transition. There's been a lot of great stuff about NI's transition. It's been a challenge to us in the community, specifically NI's lack of focus for a period of time on LabVIEW. There's this amazing quote where the president of the Test and Measurement Business Unit for Emerson, AKA also known as, I would say, CEO of NI, because that's the function she's playing, as NI reports up to the Emerson leadership chain, Ritu got out and said, NI is the LabVIEW company. And I don't know if Ritu, if you heard all of us clapping and cheering, we are clapping and cheering. And I want to turn it over to Tim. What are your thoughts on this? You seem pretty excited.
It's one of the best news I've had. I reading the article last week again, and like, okay, I stopped reading initially when I should have. But yeah, it's wonderful news. They're going back to where they were like 10 years ago, I'll say. So they're based on our quotes, it sounds like they're getting away from the business unit side and going back to products, which is what we've been desiring so much for them to do. Is like, give me a good DAC, give me a good DMM, give me a good Pixie system, give me this product so I can build my own, make LabVIEW what it should be, concentrate on LabVIEW. LabVIEW brings everything together. That was the I'm running out of terms there. But it's supposed to be LabVIEW as the glue to bring, yeah, it was the glue to bring everything together. That was what NI's marketing was for a very long time at NI Week. They would say, here's our Pixie system, here's our DUTs, and here's LabVIEW bringing it all together. And that's what they need to get back to, and sounds like they're going there. So I'm very excited about this.
I mean, I was shocked that there was no, go back a couple of years, there was nobody in charge of messaging any products, let alone LabVIEW. And that shocked me. Is, oh no, that's all part of the business unit. Well, LabVIEW doesn't sit in a business unit. So so what are they going to use eventually in the business units if they don't have any products?
Well, at best, you're getting pulled in 5 different directions too. Yeah,
so I really like it. I'm quite. I thought, I spoke to the guy who wrote the script and on that part of it, and I really praised him up. I said, this is excellent. This is just what we wanted to hear.
So who was it you spoke to?
I think it was Graham Greene.
Okay, excellent.
He wrote that part.
Good.
I don't know how much of all the rest of it he wrote, because I'm old and stuff gets fuzzy. But really, the LabVIEW facing stuff was really good, and I've heard some really good things from various sort of internal people about Ritu sort of asking to be shown LabVIEW, and various advocates in the company showing LabVIEW to her and showing the power of it, and I really felt that was lacking. I felt personally that they didn't understand the difference. I mean, take if you got dyslexia, you could be a programmer with LabVIEW. A dyslexic, quite a lot of LabVIEw programmers are dyslexic. But that whole thing, without LabVIEW, that whole career path would be unavailable to you. And I've always thought that was a really good anchor to how different it is, and how people should understand how different writing software diagrammatically is to writing software in words, So I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased about the messaging.
Well, and it's one of those scenarios in which LabVIEW is so solid. LabVIEW turns 38 in October, I believe. Yes, 38 in October. And it's been a fixture in our industry. It is the only language designed by engineers for engineers. And as an engineer, I'm like a flow chart. I'm not reading books. I want a flow chart. And that's my code. I'm sorry, Tim, you were saying something.
I was like, no, I was just making a wise ass comment. It's like, where have I heard that phrase before? Because it's one of the ones you and Steve came with for CTI.
Yep, exactly. It's the only language written for engineers by engineers. And having been on the inside, having been at NI back in the early days, and then being at NI from, I think it was June 2011 to December 2023. And before I departed from NI, I had already seen the shift back to a LabVIEW centric focus. And it had several conversations with a couple of executives, but I really deeply appreciate Ritu's inquisitiveness and desire to hear from the customers and the community and act on it. I'm going to draw a really bad analogy, but it's kind of a legitimate analogy. There's an aircraft manufacturer out of the Pacific Northwest, and that company reorganized with all of the bean, when they merged with another company, basically the bean counters ended up in the executive positions. And I wish I had the quote handy, but Elon Musk has a really good quote. You're really in trouble if the CEO of a company really doesn't understand how to build an aircraft or much less a rocket, and he's just a bean counter. And that company hasn't figured out how to go back to their deep engineering roots and excellence in engineering roots. And I feel like from the if you look at the time frame of when Eric Starkloff stepped down, I can't remember, that was probably, I don't know, spring of 2023 to where we are today, spring of 2024. And
October?
well,
Maybe
I
not,
think
this one,
eventually,
this third quarter last year.
yeah, so it's been, Ritu's had a year to a year and a half to turn the boat around. And oh my gosh, she's done it. And I'm in, kudos to the executive leadership to Ritu and the coaching that they're getting for Emerson, because this was a rapid shift. I saw the shift happening before I departed, but the speed at which it is shifting has increased since the closing of the merger back in October 2023.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll just throw this in as like at the beginning of the year, literally beginning of the year. Steve can attest to this one. I was jaded was the actual term I used. I was so jaded. I didn't know where I was going with. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff personally that was happening at the same times, but I was just in the dumps.
Yep.
And after this NI Connect, like I could not be more optimistic about LabVIEW and its future. And Ritu is part of that. And Emerson Bio is probably the best thing that could have happened.
Yeah. I've always said the Emerson, well, since I read their perspective, I always said that is so much, there's so much LabVIEW bias in that perspective. I think LabVIEW was mentioned like 9 times and in their perspective.
Yes.
Nothing else was. And other software products. So, that to me made me think, well, I know why they're buying this, and then you can see why they would want it. No, I think I don't know, systematically I'm beginning to see the right bits coming into place. It's a super tanker. You're trying to turn a super tanker around. So yeah, people have to bear with it. There's a shortage of very difficult to replace resources, because they've lost a lot of people from LabVIEW R&D, and they're not very simple to replace. They've lost a lot of advocates, so it's going to be an ongoing problem, shall we say, for the next 2 or 3 years, I would think, until they've got the right people in the right places. We just have to give it time, but the system's there, the people responsible are beginning to be there, the power structures are beginning to have the right amounts of power, shall we say, and I will say one thing is all the other people in the business units and that they've worked really hard, and it's a shame, and anyone that's job is affected and all of that. It's always horrible being made redundant and having your job change around you. So it's a cruel thing, but from the LabVIEW perspective, I see it where I want it to be, and I think from an NI perspective, it's got to be a good thing. Surely, it's a much better thing to concentrate on the thing that you've done successfully for the last 38 years. But maybe that's a bit too simple.
And just to throw a little more,
go Tim.
Another little twist there is Ritu is coming from a business unit perspective. That was her background. That's why she was hired by Starkloff. So this is a completely new mindset for her at the same time.
Yes.
So so it's something that you have to realize, that she is changing her mindset at the same time. So we have to give a little grace here. They're not going to get things perfect, but they're definitely moving in the right direction. Yeah.
And I think some of the quotes, Tim, that you have captured is when the author was saying, I have described LabVIEW as a religion. And Ritu says, I completely agree. It has a cult-like following. And And it does, because it is truly unique. It is graphical. I can remember code that I've seen over the decades. And it goes back to that very, very basic quote. I think it was Christian Altenbach had, I live in a graphical world. I want to program graphically.
Mhm.
And that's how our brains work. They're graphical. We look at pictures and things, and we don't spend 24/7 in front of text. We spend 24/7, or hopefully most of our 24/7, not in front of text, unless you're reading a darn good book. And so LabVIEW, by its very nature, 38 years ago, made sense for engineers, and it still does. And so I'm super excited, because in my giving back years that Sam and I are going to kick off in a couple of weeks, I want to be able to equip kids, and kids who, a little bit longer down the road, kids who are coming from situations where they don't have the advantages that other kids do. I want them to be able to learn STEM from LabVIEW, because I just think LabVIEW is so powerful. So I'm super excited, because this is going to empower my giving back years as well. Before we shift, any other comments on how excited we all are?
I mean, the only thing I would say is from a balance side, if you prefer text, that's cool. Just enjoy text. But for us, I mean, I've been able to make bigger, more complex systems quicker. I can go back to code I wrote 25 years ago and fix it and leave in minutes and not hours. And all of that stuff is what drives me and what I find important. That's the triggers here is I can fit more of it in my head, and I can remember more of it because of that. Now, if you can do exactly the same with text, then there's a multitude of fantastic job opportunities for you with much higher pay. But I like LabVIEW.
Got it. All right. Speaking of LabVIEW, last month, and this podcast is still monthly at the moment. We'll see when that changes. And then it will no longer be this month in LabVIEW. It will be too much information in LabVIEW. We were talking a little bit about the LabVIEW roadmap, and I had mentioned that it was in our LabVIEW Champions meeting where NI really committed for our regular LabVIEW Champions meetings, and those meetings are NDA'd, but we're going to get a glimpse of the roadmap on a regular basis, which is absolutely fantastic. And even in a very short period of time, we're seeing that roadmap really shift. So I'm going to go back to the example of what Steve said. You've got this big ship and you need to turn it around. Well, first of all, you got to get it out of the dock first, back it up, start to turn this ship around, but it seems to be turning rather quickly. So, Steve, what comments do you have on how you're seeing the roadmap evolve and evolve quickly?
I think what I'm seeing is obviously LabVIEW R&D is person constrained. They are going to be adding people, we've been told, which is cool. So they need to prioritize, and that's just good management. People can say, oh, but no software project has ever got better by throwing 100 green engineers at it. So I much rather people take time, train up, get good at what they do, and then let loose on the code base. So these things take time, but they're doing it systematically. So everyone's pet project may not get to the bubble to the top, but they're beginning to talk about quite a lot of really useful and interesting additions, and they're engaging with us, certainly the champions, which is, in my personal opinion, is both good and bad. So I've been kind of saying, well, I would like NI to have an internal advocate who is the in-between person, rather than getting a fire hose of requirements from loads of enthusiastic super users. Just because it's well, if everyone's used Visual Basic, you'll understand what happened at Visual Basic 6, and that was what they did. So, but they seem to be doing it in a consistent way with some feedback. They're coming back to us with feedback saying these are the areas we're looking at, and it all seems very sensible. I mean, if I've got a thing which I say is really important, and Eric plainly says to me, well, then we're not going to work on it. That's actually fine. Because as long as you come back and say, we've listened to you, but this is our, we're the ones doing the work here. We're the ones taking the risk. We've decided that we can't do that at this point with the resources we have. Absolutely fine. Just I'll stop worrying about that then and go and badger about something else.
Well, at least you have some.
I was going to say, and then I'll pass off to Sam, because Steve, you've been consistent in that. Because I think you posted on something along those lines in the forums years ago, where it's, as the community and as leaders in the community, we just want to be heard.
Yep.
And give us your reason why our idea gets either deprioritized or it's off the list completely. Great. Maybe it's something we go do in the community instead. And we appreciate, and I think it's been consistent over the years. Now, granted, LabVIEW didn't get a lot of love and attention for 5+ years, but now that it's getting more attention, NI is also consistently saying, we want to make sure that we've got the core of LabVIEW is what it needs to be. And we at NI don't need to create all the add-ons and all the other things. Let the community build some of those things. Let the community also help extend LabVIEW. So sorry, Sam, I cut you off there. And I know we might slide into a little bit of conversation about open source as well. So Sam?
Well, you pretty much said what I was going to say, which is basically, understanding the reasoning behind it is also helpful, right? So if I have this great idea and then I was like, hey, we've got these other priorities, if I agree with their priorities, or at least I can see where they're going, that helps me make decisions a lot easier. I also agree with the idea that there are some things that the community can do, and there are some things that only NI can do. I think prioritize the things that only NI can do for the most part.
So Sam, I'm going to follow up with one thing that you said there, and parenting 101. My kids got to the age where my son was just like, Mom, even if you say no, tell me why. I just want to understand the why. Don't say because I said so.
Yeah. I'd like if I asked for something and they said no, the ideal response would be no, but what we're going to do is provide you with the hooks to do it yourself.
Yeah.
That would be the absolute perfect, consistent response is what I would like to all of these things. And that's, I think, the things they should be producing. And NI should be producing hooks to allow us to do the things that we want to do, not producing the things we want to do.
And that's just like me going to my son and saying, son, I'm not going to buy you that thing, but I will give you some jobs so that you can earn the money so that you can go buy that thing.
Yes, right. Exactly. And I think I think they have to do a real shift in the way they work. And I've been thinking about it quite a lot for the last sort of couple of weeks, really, is that they're going to have to become a starter of projects, not a finisher of projects. They're going to have to become a generator of tests and specifications at the start of a project. And they're going to have to be gatekeepers for any incoming code that the community produces. And those are all quite strange things to the way NI produces software currently. It's a big change. And again, I temper people's expectations with the open source stuff. That we're all learning how to do this together, and that's brilliant. The fact that, again, this is realistic. We would have had to have done this anyway. There's no guru sat on the top of a hill that knows everything. We all have to learn together, and that's actually, it's not going to be a completely smooth ride, but it's a good ride. It's going to make everything better at the end, and that's cool. So anyway, that's my philosophical piece for that.
I like the philosophical aspect of it, and you're definitely leading that. Even with the CTI and the Community Training Initiative is getting it out there. And, I had a few of my buddies, the Fab Four, the DSH workshop guys kind of helping coach me on this GitHub thing and forks and branches and trees and leaves and trying to figure out what the Sam Hill, all that stuff is, which has been great. It's been a great learning opportunity. And so as we're talking a little bit about open source and the fact that, many of us have been able to get a lot done just with LabVIEW and maybe a few extra tools on the side. And some of us are not as immersed in open source communities, open source ways of doing things. And so, Sam, do you want to share a little bit about some of your thoughts on open source ideas you've had? And then definitely want to get some more feedback, Tim, from you, since the industry you're in is not exactly open source. But let's start with Sam.
Well, one of my biggest complaints about LabVIEW in general lately has been the lack of refactoring tools around classes and stuff. So I think that's a ripe opportunity for us as a community to put together some refactoring tools. I think, to Eli about it on the podcast, and he's like, oh, the community should do that. So Anton and I are doing a huddle or whatever you call it at GDevCon about that. So if you're interested in that, come join us and we'll talk about we're going to take an inventory of what's out there, what we need, where the missing pieces are, and figure out if we can put together a nice refactoring package for LabVIEW. So I think that'd be kind of cool.
What is a huddle? Is that going to be like a side meeting, or is that part of the agenda for GDevCon?
So Steve could probably explain it better, but I think it's our open source, or not open source. What is it? Open
space.
Word I was looking for. Yeah. So yeah, I think they use the word huddle instead of open space, but that's basically what it is.
Yeah, so at GDevCon Europe, we're going to finish the presentations. We went to 3 days. We're going to finish the presentations at 2:00. And then from 2:00 to 5:00, people can just do what they want. So they can book rooms, they can be, and yeah, the concept is open source is a good bit, but even, down to the guys running the exhibitions can be doing demos, people whose presentations were rejected, but they still want to talk about it, can get a group together. It's little workshops, anything like that. That's what that space is for. So we're experimenting.
I don't want to jump ahead to our conversation on GDevCon yet, but I just wanted to make sure, Sam, that I can join a huddle without missing one of the amazing presentations for GDevCon. Anything else, Sam, really from your mind on the open source side? Because I know you've had some experiments of things you've thought about trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I have several open source projects. I've had trouble trying to get people to join to work on them. So one of my thoughts is, and I need to do this, is just set aside a couple hours every week and just be like, hey, this is the open source, whatever, get together. And anybody who wants to come, we can come and work on some open source projects together. I think that would be kind of cool.
I like that idea, because as someone who might be intimidated by open source and thinking, wait a minute, how am I going to contribute to open source when I've only been programming LabVIEW for 7 years? What do I really know compared to these, giants in the community? I love that idea.
Yeah, I think that would work really well.
It's a training opportunity at the same time.
Yes. Exactly. And it's a way to spread knowledge and
No,
I like it.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem with open source is actually trying to find a problem that many people want to solve, which I think is where your problem is getting people to join up with whatever issue, because you're targeting one specific issue. How many people actually have that specific issue? If it's something a lot of people are getting, a lot of people join it.
I think join though too for the learning training. Sorry, Steve.
No worries, mate. I think the thing with LabVIEW is you can make a lot of changes in 20 minutes.
That's true too.
So I think I've talked about this before. In the factory, it's called the takt time. It's how long an actual process takes from start to finish, and you get a rhythm. Now, the issue with LabVIEW is you can make a lot of changes, and that then becomes a problem when you're committing those changes, and things become unmanageable very quickly. And the way open source for something like Linux works really well is you have lots of people making lots of tiny changes, and things gradually grow. So I think Sam's idea actually addresses that somewhat. Is okay, I know we can make a lot of changes. Let's all make them together.
Yeah.
So rather than have 15 people, making 15 large changes at the same time, get together in a meeting, have a driven exercise.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would work really well.
Can I add to your point, though? I honestly think that one of the biggest mistakes we make as LabVIEW developers is we take too big of steps. I think we try to change too much at once.
Yes,
I
Because it's
I
easy
agree.
to.
I think we need to train ourselves to take
Yes.
many more, much smaller steps. There's a GPA Hill has a thing, many more, much smaller steps.
And
Yeah,
I think
to Steve's
that
point
is-
earlier, it's like it's so easy to make the bigger steps in
Yes.
LabVIEW.
it's easier
it's
but
natural.
riskier.
Yes,
Because when you take
it is
that big
risky.
leap, if it pays off, everything's great. When it doesn't pay off, then you waste more time debugging why your big giant step didn't work.
And I think
Correct.
this is the issue with that we're going to hit with open source and LabVIEW, is that we've got this way that we work. We're incredibly productive. It's a rapid application development tool that makes us develop code rapidly. Well, how do we slow that down to make it manageable? This is where I'm saying that NI has to get into the practice of writing tests and saying, okay, we want this small change done by the community. Here's the test we want satisfied. When it's satisfied, we'll commit, and then we'll release a next test.
Good test-driven development.
Yeah, well, I think it'll work really well. For me, in my company, test-driven development doesn't work. I was developing code beforehand, and it's just a nose. I just find it boring. For open source, where you have to slow people down, you have to have the process where you make that rigor work for you, and I think that's really the way I envisage it now, and I think that's going to be the thing that gets us up to speed with things like test-driven design. Really
Well, this also pushes how much code quality do you need in your product? Since we're going open source with a lot of these things, we want them to be the highest quality going into a product.
Right.
If you're just selling something to test this single unit, you don't care if it screws up in 10 years because you don't have that product anymore. So you don't have the same level of quality. Go ahead, Sam.
It also goes to like just the way we work in general, but for open source, right? If I want to contribute to your project, if I pull it down and it has tests that I can run and say, yes, I didn't break anything, that makes me more confident making changes to your code. Because we all know this idea of like, I inherit this code and I make a change and I change something over here and all this stuff over here breaks. If you have tests, at least if I change something over here, everything over here breaks, I know about it. And I can be like, okay, let me take a step back and try that again or do something different. So tests give you the confidence to be able to make changes. And also to Steve's point, like, doing stuff for LabVIEW, right? The icon editor, right? That might get incorporated into LabVIEW itself. There are certain things that they have to do to make sure it works in LabVIEW, right? The localization and all this other stuff. They can write tests for that. And if you pull it and you make a change, they say, look, you got to make all these tests pass before we can accept it into LabVIEW. That's very clear. That's like absolutely of exactly what has to happen in order for my code to get accepted into LabVIEW. That's great. Because the last thing I want to do is spend a bunch of time making changes and submit it, and they say, oh, it doesn't work in LabVIEW, so we can't use it. Right.
And Sam, what I love about that is I don't want to go spin my wheels writing the test code. So if somebody else is writing the test code for me, that's perfect. Now I have my little bubble that I can work under.
Absolutely perfect for me, because I hate writing tests. So I'd much rather have my recipient do the thing I want to do. I solve problems. That's what my brain is set up to do. It's been set up over 40 years to do that. So there ain't no bend in it. That's what it does. It solves problems.
No new tricks for Steve.
Well, no. I'll learn new tricks to do with solving problems. That's it.
There we go. Fantastic.
Well, yeah, I think that's a real opportunity. I think actually the mob programming aspect of it, which we would come to, is I think that would work really nicely with it too. So whether that's probably how I envisage success now, is that you would have a strong group working on a project. You meet, like you say, at a regular time, work on the project, commit, sign off tests, bonk, jobs are good. So yeah, I like that.
So one of the things when we were hanging out in the green room, Tim, you learned is corralling this group can be a challenge. And so I am now corralling this group, and we're going to shift a little bit. And we're going to, before we really shift into some of the community news and events and things like that, as we're getting into the broader space and leaving Austin and NI, I thought it'd be fun to hear, just real quickly, I'd love to hear a quick tidbit about where are you broadcasting from and tell me something interesting about where you're broadcasting from, because first I broadcast from Cleburne, Texas, and the closest Buc-ee's was about 10 miles away. Then I broadcast from Denver, and the closest Buc-ee was 50. Now my closest Buc-ee's is 20 miles away. So Steve, Tim, and Sam, tell us where you are.
I'll say
And
my closest Buc-ee's within the next year, I think, will be about 100 miles.
oh, nice.
They're building one a little north of Dayton, which I do have to go up there every once in a while. I'm broadcasting from Cincinnati, Ohio. I work for Northrop Grumman here in Cincinnati. I am doing some work up in the Dayton office as well. I'm not on the base at all, so don't ask me about that. So there you go. Buc-ee's is coming.
Buc-ee's is coming. And the facts can be something interesting that have absolutely nothing to do with Buc-ee's. Steve.
Well, I'm broadcasting from the deepest hearts of Hampshire in the UK. So in Whitchurch, which there are Whit churches everywhere, but generally where there's limestone. It's a geographical thing. If you do a look for Whitchurches, it's a small town of about 10,000 people. We have a garage where I can buy sweets and petrol. Does that count? That's not a Buc-ee's though. That's as close to a Buc-ee's as we get in Whitchurch.
My wife would call that the convenient.
Yes.
Because that's their little gas station from where she's from.
Yep.
Sam, you're broadcasting down the street from the home of the next GDevCon.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to mention. I used to live in Pittsburgh, which is kind of out near Tim's. How far away is Cincinnati? Like 3 hours?
4.5 hours to pay based on
So,
how I used to drive.
Yeah, by US standards, that's a little far, but yeah.
Depends on my wife is driving with me or not.
Buffalo Rose, I can look out. Clear Creek, it runs right down the backyard. I posted a video on the Discord of some people paddleboarding Clear Creek, which is kind of crazy, but if anybody wants to do that, it'll be a little lower when the conference comes around. So, but yeah, we should go tubing. I don't know. You didn't go tubing the first year, did you? We were in Golden.
Okay, so what is the temperature of that water when you go tubing?
Well, right now it's really cold, but it'll be warmer, but it's still cold.
And I have jumped I got my permanent man card when I jumped into a lake that was 12,000 feet with snow on the side of the banks. And
yeah, and it's got to have ice floating in it and stuff.
Oh yeah, it had ice floating in it, but it was August and it took about 3 hours to warm up. So I'm in a little town that refers to itself as Rocket City. Do any of Tim, Sam, do you know where Rocket City is?
Alabama.
Oh, okay.
Huntsville, Alabama, where they built
I guess like Cocoa Beach or Houston, but yeah, Huntsville.
That's Florida.
Huntsville, Alabama. Now, the other thing that's interesting
Cocoa is beautiful, by the way.
What's that?
Cocoa Beach, Florida is beautiful.
I know. I read the book of great stuff, and it did not speak very highly of Cocoa Beach, but I've never been there.
No, that's where they used to launch the shuttle rockets. I think they still do Delta 2s there. The Delta 2s finish.
Well, that's where Elon is launching his stuff. And I was actually staying in Cocoa Beach, and we had missed 2 launches because they got canceled in January. It was like actually too cold in Florida. So this was a Sunday night. And so Tim, half of us that were staying at this hotel were watching the Bengals in a playoff game. The other half of us were on the beach texting back and forth, waiting for the launch that ended up not happening because a cruise ship actually.
I remember that. Okay.
Yeah. So anyhow, they have rubber ducks. They have little statues of rubber ducks, and there's 15 rubber ducks in downtown Huntsville. And I'm going to go find all the rubber ducks as soon as I get off this call. I'm going to go on the rubber duck search, and I'll let you guys know how exciting it is. And then there is also, I think it's the largest space.
My daughter stole my rubber duck. I used to have one that I kept in my cube for rubber duck debugging.
Rubber duck debugging, absolutely, yep. Yeah. So I'll go find the rubber ducks. They also have the nation's largest space museum, and it is affiliated with the Smithsonian. And if you want to go see one of the amazing space museums in the U.S., it's actually really close to Dulles Airport, not the one that's in downtown D.C., but Dulles Airport. Amazing space museum, and the entire history of aircraft. And then there's one here in Huntsville. So now we've talked about all of our great.
There's a good one in Dayton as well.
And there's one in Dayton. Okay, okay.
There's one in the Rockies that has some space stuff out here too.
Yeah.
It's more aircraft. There's some space stuff.
Yeah. All right, since we're talking about amazing locations and it is the middle of summer, what is going on in the LabVIEW world this summer? Tim,
Summer
you
of
doing some
LabVIEW.
wordles. Yes.
So the summer of LabVIEW, we just finished up. I guess it's been another week or two. The word search challenge, which is a lot of fun. I beat Sam, which is all that really matters.
Yeah, well, thank you for the tip, Tim, or you would have beat me by a lot more.
So Tim, what is Summer of LabVIEW?
So basically, Derek has come up with Darren's help. Darren Nattinger. I think I got that right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, you got it right. Nattinger. Yes.
Nattinger. They came up with 4 challenges to do during the summer that basically last 3 to 4 weeks. So you have so much time to do whatever challenge. So the first one was a word search. So basically, you're given a big giant 2D array of strings with letters in, and then a 1D array of words, strings, and then you have to find all the words in the word search. And there was a mad rush to get it done as fast as possible. So that was a lot of fun.
The answer was like a couple milliseconds or something, right?
Yeah, the final answer, the guy down like tens of milliseconds. Like, holy cow!
Did they post that code? Because I want to go look at that. Because I'm kind of
not yet, not that I've seen yet. I know Derek is planning on having a meeting to talk through all the submissions and who won and what was fastest and whatnot. So that'll be a fun learning opportunity as well.
My code was fairly optimized, but not that optimized.
I found some really weird tricks. Basically, the main thing I found, the main goal is speed. So the more checks I took out, so basically I took out safety checks, and that made it faster.
Like running off the end of the array. So I found like running off the end of the array, checking that something is less than 0 is really easy. Checking against another number suddenly slowed everything down. So you could check like one bound that it was less than 0, but the upper bound, you just let it go and it was faster.
Yes. That was
it was
a
faster
major
to
one
check
for me.
to go way out here than it was to just do that check and cut it out. So
yes.
Yeah.
It was easier to just let it run through instead of checking the word length. Do we have enough? And do the math to see if there's enough space. No, don't bother.
The other one was doing math on arrays of numbers as opposed to like indexing it.
That was the other major one I had. I changed the 2D array into a byte array.
U8 array. Yes, the U8 arrays were also.
And then I could actually use search 1D array to look for the first letter. And that was super fast. I was amazed how much speed I gained from that.
My original thought, Tim, and I talked to somebody else who also had this idea. I don't know that anybody actually did it, was to turn it into, here's an array of horizontal, here's an array of vertical, here's an array of all the, and make it basically a bunch of 1D arrays.
People did do that.
And then you could just do a word search of like search for a string, and you could even just reverse it. But my problem is then you got to like do the conversion to get all the indexes back, and like
it's a lot of pre-processing. By the time you do that, you could have just gone through it all already.
Yeah, exactly. And like doing horizontal and vertical is easy. Doing the diagonals was hard.
Yes.
They're all ranks and they start at different spots, and that was the part that tripped me up. If it was just horizontal and vertical, I totally would have done the calculate the horizontal, the vertical, and then just reverse it and search, and that would probably be fast. I
tried doing that at one point, and it actually became a lot slower when I tried working backwards at the same time.
Well, part of the challenge with the optimization part is you need to know like what does the data look like? Anytime you're doing optimization, I think you have to know what the input data is, right? Because in our case, like, okay, it was random strings, but if it was actual words, there's certain patterns that words follow, and you could do some optimizations. If you knew the size of the grid versus the size of the word, you could do some optimizations. So there's a lot of little tricks that you could do to make it better, but you have to know what the input data is.
Right. All we were told is you have a 2D array of strings and a 1D array of strings. Find the 1D array strings in the 2D. We weren't giving size or anything. So that was a lot of fun.
I'm seeing another Darren Nattinger session that will be based on optimization of this challenge.
Yeah, he has done optimization things in the past, but it would be very interesting to have Darren do a take on that. Yeah, just like, here are all the submissions. Here's what worked well. Here's what didn't.
I think the Shuri Studios just released one from NI Connect from Darren.
Is it an optimization one? I don't know.
I think it was his optimization one.
I'd
have
to double check.
Professor Pragmatism, you didn't do the Summer of LabVIEW?
No, he was too important.
Doesn't pay. It does take away time from paying jobs. I will
Steve, we
say
can't
that.
hear you.
Are you
Yo,
muted?
Steve, we can't hear you.
Mute yourself.
So-
Oh,
I understand.
I've lent on my mute button.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
I would like to actually, because the conversations about that was quite have been quite interested. I
Well,
tend
I'm intrigued now. I want to go try the
Mm.
Wordle just to, start playing around with some different ideas. And so
Correct.
we can do it.
Yeah.
So the goal with Wordle is to actually play Wordle and try to get the
Right.
guesses down as much as possible. Execution speed doesn't matter, so you're optimizing for different things in this case.
Or algorithms and statistics.
Yes.
And not necessarily algorithms for speed, but just like, algorithms for like, what can we do with all this data? How can we simplify it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, and
yes,
it's interesting, even though we're not talking AI today, I mean, the core of AI is clean data. And so being able to optimize, being able to analyze data, potentially optimize data from LabVIEW is potentially a pretty good skill in the future.
That's actually a huge thing, right? Like cleaning the input data is huge, and that
Mhm.
affects your assumptions in your algorithms too, right? Like if you can assume that, hey, I'm never going to get not a number, hey, that simplifies your algorithm somewhat, or I'm never going to get. So like, I think that goes, the analogy I would make is in software, right? You can only do so much. So in the hardware space, you got to make sure you're sampling it the right way. You got to make sure you're fully saturating everything and all of that. And I think AI is the same way. Like you've got to make sure that your input data is correct before you can do things. I don't know if that analogy makes sense, but it made sense in my head before I said it. So
I think it made sense.
now as I'm thinking about it, I'm not entirely sure, but
All right. Anything else on summer of LabVIEW?
Well,
the number
let me
of
get the actual date here.
submissions was incredibly high, I think.
There's 881 submissions for the word search one with
Look at that.
36 participants.
I was going to say there's a lot per participant.
Yeah,
'Cause I
there's
see
one per.
60,000.
How was
Yeah,
how's
there's
it
one person
compared to
that did a
last
lot.
summer?
I don't know.
I
I
wouldn't
didn't dive
say
that.
for the square battle, it was much less than 36. I think maybe like less than 10. Might have been like single
Oh, wow.
digits. But
Yeah,
that
so-
one required a little bit more. And it was also a little higher level. Like you had to understand
Yeah.
objects a little bit because it was object oriented, which I mean, it wasn't like super object oriented, but you need to have some idea of objects. And there were a lot of things going on in this square battle that made it a little bit more tricky. The word search one, at least on its surface, seems a little bit more straightforward. But once you start figuring out all the optimizations, then it goes very deep down the rabbit hole very quickly. But
And what are the two that are coming up?
there's a Wordle, and I don't know what the third
We
one
have
is.
Wordle happening now. That ends on the 13th, so next Saturday, next Saturday as of
Can still do
recording right now.
submissions on Wordle and beat you, Tim?
You easily could, because every time I try doing optimization, it gets worse.
Yeah.
Um,
So also for the word search and the Wordle, they give you a reference implementation. So it's very easy to just take the reference implementation and just say, okay, what can I make one small change that makes it a little bit faster for the word search at least? And there were a couple that were kind of obvious, and it's like, okay, yeah, I can change that. And oh yes, that's faster. Make your submission. I mean, you're not going to beat anybody because everybody else has probably already thought that, but it's something, and you can learn something from that.
So they've not published the next two challenges. So I had an idea of what they were, but I don't think I'm going to spoil it. I think we should allow. I know the fourth one is cool.
yeah, well, he flat out telling me what they were, so I think we can tell.
Are there going to be 4 of them?
There's 4 of them.
There's 4 of them.
So the next one is Reversey, which is basically an older version of Othello.
Yeah.
And then the last one is a 3D car driving simulation, which
Oh,
looks
I knew
very
the
interesting.
3D car thing because he had posted about that.
Yeah,
Well,
he's very excited
we talked
about that
it at CTI, at NI Connect. And then Derek Bomarito's page on YouTube is
Illuminated G. Don't ask me what it was for the
That's his
it's
name.
got that
Illuminated
link.
G. Yeah,
Illuminated G.
awesome. All right, so a lot of fun stuff to do. I know we all have a lot of free time. So I'm hoping there's something still active around that August timeframe, and then I'll start digging in and join you guys. So
There is educational value though. It's not just fun. You actually learn stuff. So
Yeah.
oh,
if
absolutely.
you're looking for a case to spend some time on it, like yes, it's fun, but like there's also some practical benefit.
Well, and Sam, even again, when we spend some time at CU Boulder later this month, talking a little bit about optimization, I mean, that's absolutely important. And so this conversation may leak into that conversation as well. So yes, it's fun, and yes, it's learning, and I look forward to joining you guys soon.
Well, so
Any
I
other
mean,
comments on that?
well,
before
you too, you
I'll
two
say
are.
before we move on.
You answer me the question. You've both been doing LabVIEW a long time. Did you learn stuff doing this?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
There you go. Well, you know, it's that's job done. Well done,
Yep.
Derek
Yeah.
and Darren.
It was fun. We learned.
I also like problems like that because being a teacher, coach, mentor, or whatever that means, it's good to have example code that like people can work with. And so you can say, hey, let's focus on optimization and give them that challenge and then help them walk through some of the steps.
Then throw out the example and start from scratch with a better algorithm.
Yeah.
Which is what I ended up doing. To circle back, Darren had his presentation, Quick Drop Your VI Execution Time at NI Connect. It is up on Sherry Studios this morning.
Oh, okay. So he did do that one in 2020 again. Okay, cool. I knew he was doing a presentation. I saw it, but I didn't remember what it was. So that's his original probably his original like benchmarking and like here are the little tips to.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's an older presentation he's done a lot of times. He tends to update it every time he does it, though.
Because certain things have improved. Most notably, I want to say that like 2023 or something, build times improved dramatically. So I'm sure he probably has some stuff in there too about like, hey, if you're building an executable, here are the things to do to make it build quicker.
And also with he's no longer in R&D, he's on TSA now, which support basically. He's finding a bunch of weird issues, so he'll talk about those as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, you don't want to miss a Darren Nattinger presentation by any means. So speaking of Darren and sliding into events, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the events that are coming up. But before I dive into that one, here's a little secret out there for you guys that are starting user groups and are restarting LabVIEW user groups. Tim, I know you have a shout out in just a moment, but there's this little secret. Don't tell anyone, but if you get in touch with Darren Nattinger, sometimes he can do a remote presentation to your user group. And if you're restarting a user group, getting DNAT out there, talking to your team is one of the best ways to get that attendance up. So and that's a little secret. Don't tell everybody that DNAT's around, Darren's around to do one of his presentations live for your team. Tim, your shout out on user groups.
So Nikita Fallon, who is the principal software growth manager in business or global business unit, her and Eli recently reached out to me trying to get the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base user group back together. We went defunct with COVID, and then the local NI rep went to Amazon, so it was completely gone. So we're trying to get that going up again. So, and I just actually got an email from someone about it. I have not read it yet, so.
Awesome.
But things are moving. They're trying to get different organizations involved and whatnot. So it's
awesome.
heading in the right
Thank you,
direction.
Nikita and Eli. Definitely thank you. All right. I wanted to focus a little bit for our last few minutes here on our #1 most amazing community events. There's a little history to these community events. If we go back, probably about 2010 or 2011 or 2009 or something like that. NI, we kicked off the very first, I don't think I was at NI. I think I was a community member at the time. Yeah, I was not at NI at the time. But a few of us twisted NI's arm and we started doing the Certified LabVIEW Architect Summits. So instead of having tracks at NI's flagship events, it was an event in and of itself that was just centered around LabVIEW, and you had to have an architect certification to attend. So it was really great, deep LabVIEW conversations. And the community around that time really started to be more open about sharing code. But things got even better when the community decided, yeah, the CLA Summit's great, but we want to make sure we have something else that fits a slightly different need. So, Steve, you want to tell us some of your thoughts that really kickstarted the very first GDevCon that is growing rapidly?
I think we felt that we so me and the league of people who present were not being given a reliable platform. So that was really the start of GDevCon. Was that NI had begun to change focus and wasn't so interested in having us around, and in some of the events we actually got in the way, you know. So we would turn up at NI days and do the community track there, and we'd have loads and loads of people in the rooms, and the poor old marketing people that actually paid for the event will have nobody going to their marketing presentations. And actually, you know, it was funny for me, but it was annoying for them. So there was a tension there right off the bat that one, we didn't feel we had a place to be as much. So we were at the behest of enthusiastic internal people at NI who were really kind, and NI would, you know, do so much work for us. But if that person left, then we were left without anything. So it was to break that, really. It's where we started in Europe, because we lost our platform at NI days. So
Right.
we kicked off that essentially down the pub in Westminster Arms in NI days, and it started from there. And essentially I just got people who were in the community building their own user groups, and I said, well, let's build a big one, and it came out of that, and we really sort of leaned into giving people a good platform. The only payment we can give is giving good videos and things like that, you know. So it was a slight change in focus, and I think as we carry on, we're going to change more and more and more. But go back to the 2010s, people didn't discuss their code. They didn't discuss process. I tried. I think in 2009, was it? We set up the CLA summits in Europe. Or was that later than that? 2011. And I had to present for like 3 hours because nobody would share any code and nobody would step forward. Everyone was very quiet. And it's that kind of openness in the community has made us the community we are. You know, it's a little thing, but if you trust people enough to share your code with them, it's actually, you know, this is the goings on in your brain. You have to be fairly brave, and the people you show it to has to be fairly supportive to make that something that people want to do. And I think we've got that. I think that certainly with the GDevCons, it's a very friendly environment, a very supportive environment. We want new presenters all the time, and we understand people get nervous, you know. So it's a good thing, and it's an essential life skill, I think, being able to present. So people should do it.
It is so much easier to present in front of a bunch of people you don't know. It's like the worst ever is to show your code in front of your peers and present in front of your peers. I mean, it's scary and intimidating, and it's even worse when you're presenting at an event and as the event organizer, you put yourself up at the same time slot as Steve Watts, and you watch everybody walking into Steve's session. So yeah, so all of you out there, you want to catch any of Steve's and Tim's and Sam's presentations. So I was going to mention, I was looking through GDevCon NA, which is coming up in Golden in a couple weeks. Super excited. Sam, I'm going to give you the floor in a second. But I was looking through the agenda, and I was trying to find 1 or 2 sessions that like really popped as, oh my gosh, this is the best session ever. These 3 sessions are worth, you know, hopping on a plane and heading out to Colorado, and it's going to be gorgeous. It's the most Golden, Colorado is the most beautiful place on the planet. If you're going to be somewhere in July, you might as well be in Golden. But I'm looking at the agenda. I'm like, oh my gosh, every single session looks amazing and interesting. And what I really appreciate about GDevCon, and we saw it in real time last year in 2023, we saw quite a few engineering leaders and test leaders bring a couple people from their team. And so people from industry were realizing, wait a minute, this is the best place for me to either bring my entire team or 2 or 3 people from my team. And when we're watching the sessions, we're sitting at a round table. We have time in between sessions to be able to talk about how that session or those last couple sessions will apply to the work that we do. Is the best place, I think, for team learning and LabVIEW is GDevCon. Any one of the 3 or 4 GDevCons. Sam, you want to comment more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, I'm very much looking forward to the keynote. I think it'll be really good. We got somebody from outside the LabVIEW community talking. It's about the art of delivering value. So I think that's going to be really cool. He's also doing a workshop the day before. But there's also some other good stuff. So I'm looking through the list. Some people who maybe everyone's not familiar with. Ashish, I think, probably has some good stuff to say on his lessons learned. I think is a really good thing to talk about. We've got Stefan's got some really cool stuff that I've seen with doing some stuff with JSON and SQLite and building tree controls and things. And then Eric's going to talk about some legal hacking type stuff that you can do with LabVIEW, which is pretty cool. Some reverse engineering stuff. And Laura's got some cool brainwave stuff. So I don't know what that's all about, but that looks kind of cool. So. And then we also have a lot of the usual suspects too. So I don't need to tell you how awesome Q and Alan and some of those people are.
Absolutely.
Cyril also does not present often, and Cyril's got some cool stuff too. So
yeah, it's great to have Cyril there. He is absolutely brilliant. Sam, what were you even thinking in your mind when you brought the first GDevCon in North America? That was a lot of work. What was the impetus behind you making that big move?
Well, I mean, I wanted something cheaper than flying to Europe every year. That was part of it. I mean, I like the European thing, and I'm happy to do that. But I think there was that, and I wanted to bring it to a wider audience. And yeah, the other thing was like I had a lot of other people to help. So if I hadn't got all that help, I probably wouldn't have done it. So big shout out to all the other board members and people who were involved early on. But I mean, we had a local user group that was pretty active, so I was able to pull from that to get some people to get involved. So I think that helped as well. So and I don't know, I'm just the kind of person that like if I see a need and I really want to fill it and nobody else is doing it, I will just do it because I want to do it for me. So there's a lot of that too.
The architect of adventure. There's a reason you have that name.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely like I see something, I'm like, hey, let's just go do it and figure it out as we go. So
are we going to be in Cincinnati in 2025? Is that where GDevCon NA is going to be?
I don't think I'm allowed to say, but it'll be closer to Cincinnati than Golden next year. So
okay, so we do have a spot.
Probably be able to drive, Tim. It might be a long drive, but so there you go. I can tell you that. Taylor
it's a long drive from Denver, Golden, Colorado to pretty much any place in the US. So it is going to be a long drive regardless.
Yeah, you might want to fly if you're going to be in Denver. But
a nice drive there.
Yeah, you'll definitely have to fly. You can't drive, Steve. I don't think
I'll find somewhere to drive. Don't you worry. I'll fly in suitably far away that I have to drive.
You can fly into Denver.
Steve, how'd you guys pick Stuttgart for this is GDevCon number 5? Or 6? I've lost track.
Yeah, number 5 that is. Our headline sponsor is Conrad.
Perfect.
Are large, and they sponsored us on a 3-year deal, and they didn't force us to do anything really. I mean, they've been an excellent sponsor, but we felt, one, we like to be in Britain and then push the boundaries out. I mean, going to Europe is a pain in the neck from the UK now, but it's really where we want to go, because dotting around, because every year we go somewhere different, dotting around is good for growing the people who want to come. You know, because if you land in, say, Stuttgart, and I don't know, 50 people are going, oh, this is a local event, I'll go to that, and they love it. Next time they'll come. Some of those will come with you. The next place you go. So yeah, we're probably back in the UK for 6, and then we're seriously considering Spain for 7.
Ooh.
Seriously considering Spain, but if
Come
we can
on,
find
Spain.
a lot of it is if we can find venues. I mean, we've moved from, so we're about 180 last year, which we try to have the venue twice the size of the amount of people that we're seating. So you're moving up to a larger venue now. It felt very large, the last one. So so we're getting to a size now where finding venues is significantly harder. I mean, in Stuttgart is very expensive. We really struggled to find a venue in Germany. Really struggled. It's a nice venue. It's not going to have the massive screen like Glasgow did. It's going to be more of a standard sort of conference center, but it's a nice one.
So we won't have Fabiola popping in very, very large, looking down all the puny people talking.
The one I liked was the guy did a presentation on icons. It's just on an IMAX.
Yeah, icons and IMAX.
I found that very funny.
Tim, any thoughts on GDevCon?
Tim, you're muted.
Gotta unmute.
Loud thoughts, Tim.
Sorry, I had coughing earlier. Yeah, I was looking online, like there's a lot of good sessions happening. I mean, instantly I see Darren Nattinger. Even the topic he's going over, he's calling it, your LabVIEW code is a work of art, but I can't read it.
Exactly. I love that.
I love the title. I'm pretty certain I know where he's going with this, and I think it's going to be a great presentation. It's a topic that comes up here and there. Getting his perspective will be a lot of fun, I think. And then Q had the other one. Quentin was the other one that has immediately popped out to me. Where'd it go? It's optimizing your code for speed, and he's using a spell checker to replace words is what he's doing it based on. So between those two, I think it's going to be great presentations. And there's a lot of smaller ones in here that I think are going to be really good. Like boost your innate human creativity and make AI your BI plus CH.
Oh, who's doing that?
By a certain person who is on this call.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say her name.
I am looking forward to my session. I'm glad that the session I'm giving is on the first day, because a lot of what I really want to do is inspire and prompt even more conversation in the AI space, and not just AI for test and measurement, because it's great that Eric Ruffett's going to talk about AI and test and measurement and what NI is doing in the morning. And then I want to broaden it out a little bit further and also talk about our amazing human creativity. So, all right, before we close out, we're going to finish up with words of wisdom. And as we were talking in the green room, if there's something that you learned, and it might be an optimization algorithm from doing Summer of LabVIEW, or it could be something completely unrelated to LabVIEW. But as we're closing out with 3 amazingly sharp gentlemen, I want to give each of you a chance to share your words of wisdom, something you picked up in the last month.
I'll go first because I'm very excited about this. So I did a video on LabVIEW and Linux, which is posted in our YouTube channel. And one of the replies was a guy called Jorg. Actually, I bet that's Jorge Augusto Mondadori. Sorry, mate, for murdering your name. And he said, "Oh, I've just installed Fedora 38 Linux on a PS4 and installed LabVIEW Community Edition on it."
Holy cow!
And that's what I said pretty much. I said, "Whoa, how cool is that?"
That's amazing.
So I'll be saving up for a PlayStation 4 at some point from eBay.
Awesome. Tim, Sam.
Oh, I hit my lessons learned with Summer LabVIEW. So just weird optimizations. Basically, byte arrays are a lot better than strings if you're going for speed.
Yeah, there we go. That's
Cool.
a good one.
I just started reading a book called Impact and Clarity, and I think that's a really important thing. I think, being very clear about what our goals are and what we're trying to achieve, I think is very interesting. I feel like sometimes we waste energy when we're not very clear. So that's
I like that. What's it called again?
impact and clarity.
Impact and clarity. Yeah.
Okay.
For those that are new to this month in LabVIEW, I think Sam reads, what do you read? What, $4 or $5 a month, something like that?
I try. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I do
thought-
about 24 to 30 a year. So every other week.
Okay. You are my inspiration on getting through books. But speaking of inspiration, I am sitting here in this lovely little hotel here in Huntsville, Alabama, and the young lady, her name's Mick, who was my server for breakfast, amazing breakfast. She had a really good quote, and she's a very creative young woman, single mom, and she said, anyone can inspire you if you allow them to. And I thought that was really interesting, very applicable. As a community, we really are a warm and inclusive community, and that's what I love about this community. And most of us that have been in this community for more than a couple of years, we want to be open and be inspired by all of our fellow community members. And so before I close this out, I just want to remind everyone, let's go be inspired by Kurt Friday, our former member who is no longer on this earth with us. It's called Viper, VIPER, and it's all capitalized except for the I on GitHub, and we'll have a link to Viper. So let's go be inspired by what Kurt has put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into, and help extend his legacy. So thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Thank you, Steve, the professor of pragmatism, Sam, the architect of adventure and the massive bookworm, and then Tim, Tip Top Tim, you are bold to join us. It was great to have you. And I'm Nancy Henson, our Chief of Connected Conversation. Thank you all. See you next month.
Cool. All right.
How do I end it? There we go. Hold on.
There we go. There we go.